Welcome back to the Deep Dive. You know how it goes. We take the exhaustive search for great content, streamline the findings, and deliver the concentrated insight you need to dive right in.
Exactly.
And today, we are not just looking for a good read, we are on a quest for the truly dark matter of the literary world.
A quest tailor-made for you, our listener, to find those genuinely underrated, twisted, and deeply atmospheric novels that are, just lurking outside the big marketing spotlight.
And first off, congratulations are in order. You've just wrapped up a major testing period, exams are done, and now it is time for the reward. A deep dive into fiction that really demands your full attention.
But the requirements are strict, right? You've told us you need tense, atmospheric stories that are just brimming with suspense, with mind games, and this is the key. With endings so shocking, they leave you absolutely speechless.
Okay, let's unpack that, because it's a high bar. We know you're already well-versed in what the genre can do.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, you love the psychological manipulation in Gone Girl, the institutional creepiness of The Silent Patient, the domestic dread of Behind Closed Doors.
Not to mention the intensity of The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, the visceral fear in Bird Box, and that philosophical, unsettling vibe of, I'm thinking of ending things.
So that caliber of reading, that sets the bar for darkness and psychological depth extremely high.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, you're experiencing something we're seeing a lot of, which is mainstream fatigue.
An algorithm loop.
The algorithm loop, exactly. And it's not a knock on those books. I mean, The Silent Patient, Gone Girl, Verity, The Housemaid, they're popular for a reason.
Of course.
But when you search for thriller recommendations online, you just see the same 5 titles over and over again on every social media thread, every bestseller list.
So you've read them, you like them, and now you want to move beyond the heavily curated top 10 list. Our mission today is to find the authors who are consistently delivering quality and originality. We want that real psychological punch, not just marketing saturation.
And we're focusing entirely on authors who the committed community of thriller readers, the Real Diehards, cite again and again for delivering genuine, shocking, and crucially original twists that really hit that high bar of darkness.
Originality is definitely the key word.
It has to be.
Yeah.
Because once you've read enough thrillers, you can spot the tropes a mile away. You see the plot armor, you can pretty much predict the twist coming.
Yeah, you get a feel for the formula.
You do. So we need writers who are truly pushing boundaries, both in terms of character depth and narrative structure.
Okay, so let's move past the noise and look at the core roster, the authors that devoted thriller readers implicitly trust.
These are the names that get cited repeatedly across multiple threads, not just for being good, but for their unwavering quality, and most importantly for this dive, their intensely dark tone.
So we're talking about a critical set of authors who got the highest volume of recommendations specifically for darkness, depth, and complex characters.
Exactly. These are the ones who are consistently performing at a high level, delivering genuine scares and suspense, book after book.
So starting off strong, who's first?
First up is Jennifer Hillier. She's consistently called fantastic and dark.
Okay.
But what really stood out to me was that readers also noted she has a nice flow to her writing.
A nice flow. Now that's interesting. For a thriller, particularly a dark one, that sounds almost counterintuitive. What does that mean?
I think it means the author is balancing some really intense subject matter with prose that's just highly readable, it's absorbing, so the darkness doesn't make the book a chore to get through.
So it actually pulls you in instead of pushing you away.
Right. That ease of reading, even when you're dealing with brutal stuff, is a huge, huge strength.
And is she a good fit for the listener's established tastes?
Oh, definitely. Hillier is specifically recommended for readers who liked that psychological intensity and moral ambiguity in books like, say, Behind Closed Doors. The community consensus is that she's a guaranteed hit for twisted plots that focus on ordinary people caught in these horrifying situations.
So what are the key titles from her work we should highlight, and what specifically makes them so dark?
Well, the titles that come up repeatedly are Jar of Hearts, which really digs into guilt and past actions. Little Secrets, which is just a masterful look at a marriage under extreme duress. Then there's Things We Do in the Dark and The Butcher.
The Butcher was a recent favorite for one reader, right?
It was, yeah. And it's a perfect example of her skill at weaving together multiple timelines and these really morally gray characters.
And what about her earlier work?
Also highly praised. For anyone looking to do a serious deep dive into her back catalog, her books like Wonderland and Creep also get a lot of love, which just confirms her career-long consistency in delivering twisted content.
So if you're looking for that combination of readability, high stakes, and moral complexity, Hillier sounds like the perfect entry point into that underrated but reliable tier.
Absolutely.
Okay, who's next?
Next up is Corinne Slaughter. And she's basically the author you turn to when you want that psychological punch to land with real physical force.
Okay, so we're leveling up the intensity here.
We really are. Her core identity, according to readers, is being dark and sometimes disturbing. She often deals with extremely sensitive, real-world issues, which gives her work this grounded, chilling realism.
She's the author who's really going to push that boundary of darkness you're asking for. But let's go deeper here. Is the disturbing element like procedural, or is it more character-driven, visceral trauma?
It's often visceral, and critically, it's integrated into the systemic darkness she explores. She's highly recommended, especially for her Will Trent series.
And what's the advantage of a series in this case?
With a series, you get to see deep character development and long-term trauma explored across multiple books, which, often provides a much richer psychological payoff that a standalone novel can.
That makes sense. Any standouts?
Her standalone False Witness was specifically highlighted as a favorite, which shows she maintains that high standard even outside of the series structure.
Now, this is where we have to insert a critical detail, one that's highly relevant to your request for more twisted the better.
Yes.
We have comments from readers who found some of her material so disturbing they had to physically remove the book from their house. That's less of a recommendation and more of an extreme warning label.
Precisely. And we're talking specifically about the reaction to her book, Pretty Girls.
Right.
That reader was so disturbed by the graphic content and the psychological cruelty, which focuses heavily on systemic violence and familial horror, that they had to physically stop reading, take a break, and get the book out of their home.
That is an absolute endorsement for a reader looking for genuine, boundary-pushing content.
It really is. If a book disturbs a seasoned reader that much, it signals an extreme darkness that aligns perfectly with someone who wants, genuinely twisted genius.
That theme of too disturbing to handle is so central to this deep dive that we have to introduce John Marrs right here alongside Slaughter.
Yes, absolutely. He was another author referenced in the community whose work forces people to take a break because of its intensity, yet he's often less discussed in the mainstream than, the big five.
So what's his specific flavor of darkness?
Marrs brings a very modern, almost technological flavor of darkness. He tends to blend psychological tension with these near-future tech anxieties.
Oh, interesting.
He writes these incredibly twisty books that force characters into morally impossible situations, often using speculative elements to just raise the stakes possibly high. His books are known for their rapid-fire pacing and extreme ethical dilemmas.
Can you give us some examples that really define his style?
The one is probably his best known. It's based on the idea of finding your guaranteed soulmate through DNA testing.
Right, it was a TV show.
It was. And it immediately turns into this dark thriller about identity and love and what connection really means. But for pure psychological horror, titles like What Lies Between Us or When You Disappeared show his willingness to go straight for the jugular in terms of character cruelty and emotional manipulation.
So he absolutely belongs in this tier of authors who deliver an intense darkness that's going to stick with you long after you finish.
Without a doubt.
Okay, moving to Lisa Jewell. She's known for a slightly different approach, right?
Yeah, she is. She's highly praised not just for the thrills, but for writing some of the best, unique, most interesting family dynamics.
So she embeds the tension right into the relationship.
Exactly, which is the hallmark of a really successful, enduring psychological thriller. Her focus on domestic situations, often involving houses and family history, makes her deeply satisfying for readers who enjoy that sort of locked room domestic dread you liked in Behind Closed Doors.
And consistency is a big selling point for her.
Huge. She's known for delivering these carefully thought out storylines that avoid unnecessary padding or, crucially, unnecessary red herrings.
Let's elaborate on that no red herring point, because a commenter specifically praised her for that. That's a fascinating insight into what modern thriller readers are looking for.
It really is. A red herring is classic mystery plotting. It's designed to misdirect and confuse the reader.
Of course.
But when a reader explicitly prefers a book without them, it suggests they value an earned twist, They want the reveal to feel inevitable, a logical, character-driven conclusion that was carefully woven into the narrative from the very beginning.
So they don't want to feel like they were just tricked by the author with some random extraneous information.
Precisely. And Jewel delivers on that earned tension.
And she also has some strong series continuity that manages to defy the typical sequel slump, which is rare.
Incredibly rare. The Family Upstairs is widely loved. It's a masterpiece of setting and creeping tension. Some readers even admit they reread it just for the atmosphere. And its sequel, The Family Remains, was praised as a genuinely good follow-up. Her more recent work, None of This Is True, is also frequently cited as a high-quality read that maintains that focus on complex relationships and secrets.
Okay, finally, in this top tier of reliable darkness, we have Lucinda Berry. Her specialty seems to be, what, emotional devastation?
That's a good way to put it. She is praised for getting into the mental aspect and knowing how to rip your heart out.
So that suggests her focus is less on the whodunit puzzle and much more on the why and the impact, the aftermath of trauma.
That's it exactly. Her work really exemplifies the psychological horror side of your request because she focuses almost exclusively on psychological breakdown and trauma response. She often writes from the perspective of survivors or people in high-stress clinical situations.
So that must give her books a very specific, chilling atmosphere.
It does. It's less about who committed the crime and more about the total destruction of the human psyche as a result of it.
So what kind of emotional devastation are we talking about here? Is it a slow burn trauma or more of an immediate psychological collapse?
It tends to be immediate, visceral psychological collapse, often tied to maternal or familial relationships, which makes it feel very personal and intrusive.
Do we have a specific example?
The example given of her darkness is Appetite for Innocence. It was noted as being profoundly disturbing, but an excellent read because it so successfully captures that mental breakdown. She is consistently named by readers who specifically look for authors who specialize in psychological turmoil and emotional grit.
So this group, Hillier, Slaughter, Mars, Jewel, and Berry, they're essentially the 5 foundational pillars of modern, dark psychological thrillers that the community trusts to deliver quality beyond the big, heavily marketed hits.
This is absolutely the place to start if you want guaranteed, consistent darkness.
Here's where it gets really interesting. We're moving into the consistent mid-listers.
Right.
These authors might not generate the sheer volume of social media buzz as the first group, but their books are consistently championed by sophisticated readers who are looking for reliable twists and strong character work.
And often with a highly distinctive style. These are authors that really warrant a deep dive because they offer specific, reliable flavors of suspense that set them apart. We're looking at authors known for their style or their tight plotting with specific titles for a targeted read.
So first up is Peter Swanson. He's described as someone who writes super fun books to read and who nails it every time.
And that phrase, nails it every time, that's the ultimate consistency metric, especially when you're dealing with complex, multi-layered plots.
What's his style? What makes his books fun if they're also thrillers?
Swanson is known for complex, fast-paced plotting that often involves narrators who are unreliable or, actively immoral.
Okay. The fun of rooting for the bad guy.
Exactly. It links him tonally to authors like Patricia Highsmith, who we'll definitely discuss later. He is heavily recommended for his 2 related books featuring the characters Henry Kimball and Lily Kintner, The Kind Worth Killing, and its sequel, The Kind Worth Saving.
That interconnectedness suggests he's also really consistent with his world building and character follow-through.
Absolutely. The enjoyment comes from following these morally dubious characters as they navigate these incredibly high-stakes scenarios. If you read those and like the format, a reader also recommended A Talent for Murder.
And what if you just want to test the waters with a standalone?
Her Every Fear was cited as a reader's favorite, which suggests that even outside his series structure, he maintains that tight plotting and that darkly entertaining experience.
Okay, next up is Riley Sager, who presents this unique dichotomy. Readers either love or hate him. Now, if we're looking for consistency, doesn't that make him less reliable?
That's a crucial point. The love-hate factor often comes from authors who rely heavily on the grand, dramatic twist at the end.
Right. If the twist works, the book is brilliant. If it feels unearned, the reader feels cheated.
Exactly. However, one of his titles received phenomenal praise for actually clearing that high hurdle, The Only One Left.
And what made The Only One Left the exception?
This book was highly recommended specifically for having a rare twist that genuinely surprised readers who admit they're usually very hard to fool. It manages to deliver a blindsiding ending that, critically, feels earned in retrospect. It wasn't just plopped in for shock value. This suggests that Sager, at his best, can pull off the ultimate trick for a seasoned thriller reader.
That is gold for someone looking for a truly speechless ending.
It really is. If you are seeking that rare, successful, truly blindsiding ending, starting with The Only One Left seems like the best possible bet.
And what about his other works, for those who find they do love his distinct style?
Readers also enjoyed The Last Time I Lied, which focuses on a disappearance at a summer camp, Lock Every Door, which is sort of a modern take on the creepy residency trope, and Survive the Night. If you enjoy the feeling of being actively misled and then brilliantly surprised, Sager is absolutely worth exploring.
Okay, so you already liked B.A. Paris's Behind Closed Doors, which is pretty much the epitome of domestic claustrophobia and terror. What are the community's recommended follow-ups?
If you enjoyed the intense, contained dread of Behind Closed Doors, Paris is highly consistent. Readers recommend The Breakdown, which deals with unreliable narration and amnesia. Also, The Therapist, which focuses on secrets in a new home, and The Guest, which was cited as a particular favorite that kept the reader just obsessively turning pages. This confirms Paris's consistency in delivering what you already know you enjoy.
That intense focus on the dark side of interpersonal relationships.
Yep. And then there's A.R. Torre, who seems to have a similar reputation for immediacy.
What do you mean by immediate?
Torre is mentioned as an author to absolutely devour. That speaks to a fast, compelling pace and a highly addictive plot. The specific title getting the most fanfare was The Last Party, with one commenter enthusiastically calling it their favorite read of 2025.
So an excellent choice for a quick, highly satisfying fix.
Exactly. ####D. The literary bridge builders, the why matters.
Finally, in this tier, we need to talk about the literary bridge builders, Tina French and Jane Harper. These authors might not focus on the rapid-fire, almost mechanized twists of some commercial thrillers, but they elevate the material.
They do. We can group them as literary thrillers because their work often explores themes of place, history, class, and social isolation with prose that is just, well, it's simply superior to many genre writers.
Let's start with Jane Harper. She's known for her Aaron Falk trilogy, but she's noted as being underrated in some spaces, like Book Talk.
Yeah, where the focus can often be on rapid consumption. She tends to lean more toward complex mysteries that are solved against the backdrop of these harsh environments. The Australian outback often becomes a character in her books.
That geographic isolation must lend itself perfectly to creating atmosphere and suspense.
It absolutely does. The sheer emptiness and difficulty of the landscape in books like The Dry or Force of Nature just intensifies the emotional and physical isolation of her characters. It's less about being fooled by a twist and more about uncovering these deep, buried secrets that are rooted in community history.
And Tana French, she seems to be universally praised for her darkness and literary quality.
She is mandatory reading for you. Her Dublin Murder Squad series is called dark, compelling, and really well written.
So what does French do so well?
She utilizes ambiguity. Her books are often about the mental toll of an investigation, the breakdown of the detectives themselves, and the difficulty of ever truly knowing the truth. She's willing to leave endings messy and questions unanswered.
Which provides a much deeper, more lasting sense of dread than a clean solution.
Exactly. It's the difference between a novel that scares you for a weekend and one that sticks with you for months because of its profound psychological insight.
Okay, now we shift focus to the true hidden gems. The books that the community feels no one has ever even heard of.
This is where we satisfy your craving for unique, boundary-pushing reads that deliver that darkness and shock without any of the mainstream noise.
This is where the reading experience itself becomes part of the suspense.
And what's fascinating here is that these recommended books often push structural and genre boundaries. They move into experimental literature and extreme horror, which is exactly what a reader burnt out on formulaic bestsellers needs. They demand more than just a plot. They want an intellectual and emotional challenge. ###DA. Unique structure and experimental reads.
Let's start with the big one for mind-bending literature. House of Leaves by Mark Danielowski. This is a foundational recommendation for atmospheric and structural horror. But for someone unfamiliar, what makes reading this book itself an act of psychological suspense?
It's the ultimate meta-narrative challenge. The book has this unconventional formatting text that shifts around, runs upside down, features extensive footnotes, and requires you to physically turn the book to read it.
So it's a very active reading experience.
Deeply immersive and often unsettling. It goes far beyond a typical thriller plot because the environment, the actual structure of the book, is actively working to disorient and confuse you, mirroring the character's journey. It definitely qualifies as mind-bending.
And then we have a recommendation that truly fits the hidden gem category. A book that's essentially a found footage horror experience in novel form, The Armillary Papers.
This is a perfect example of a book that creates an obsessive reading experience. The description says the book itself is essentially evidence in a mystery that goes outside of the book.
What does that mean, goes outside the book?
It suggests a heavily annotated, fragmented, or epistolary structure that's designed to make you, the reader, feel like a detective obsessing over the primary source material. It creates this intense, private, and highly unique thriller experience because you're working to solve the mystery outside of the usual narrative confines. It's a reading project, not just a passive story.
Wow. And we have two more that are highly praised for their uniqueness. First, Marrow by Tarryn Fisher.
Yeah, cited specifically for shocking twists by a reader who claimed, "No one has read it but me," which suggests genuine obscurity and high satisfaction.
And then there's Strange Sally Diamond by Liz Nugent.
This one is a remarkable recommendation because of its unique tone. It's described as unique, weird, sad-arc, and sweet all at the same time.
That's quite a combination.
The analogy someone used is that it reads like the beloved character Eleanor Oliphant stepped into a horror or suspense novel. That blend of a gentle character study with dark suspense is incredibly distinctive and definitely avoids mainstream tropes. #B, extreme and body horror elements.
You asked for darker and more twisted, and the community delivered, providing recommendations that venture into true horror. Let's talk about Chuck Palahniuk's Haunted.
Haunted is recommended for fitting that extreme, darker, more twisted preference, and the content is notoriously graphic.
What's the setup?
The central plot involves a group of aspiring writers who get trapped in an abandoned theater, enduring these grueling circumstances as part of a supposed writer's contest. The book includes short stories written by these characters that are described as gory and completely disgusting, often venturing into body horror and extreme psychological torture.
Okay, so this is not for the faint of heart.
Not at all. This is the ultimate test of your preference for extreme content.
Another classic dark recommendation is Perfume by Patrick Suskind, known for its disturbing protagonist, a killer obsessed with scent.
And we also have crucial international recommendations that bridge literature and genre horror. Take Let the Right One In from Sweden, which was noted as really amazing and dark and disturbing. It uses vampire mythology to explore deep themes of childhood loneliness and moral ambiguity.
And critically, we have Natsuo Kirino's dark Japanese fiction, Out. Out received high praise specifically for its visceral impact and moral bleakness. What is it about this novel that caused one reader to physically shudder?
Out is a relentless exploration of desperate women in desperate circumstances. It focuses on a group of factory workers who commit a murder and then attempt to cover it up. The violence and the moral compromises are handled with this cold, unflinching realism that's typical of Japanese dark fiction. That visceral reaction is exactly what you get when you step outside the formulaic mainstream thriller.
And then we have a genre-bending medical horror thriller, Gravity by Tess Gerritsen. The plot details sound absolutely terrifying just from the setting alone.
This is high-concept, isolated, intense horror that plays on our scientific fears. The plot involves a NASA doctor studying organisms in space, and the mission aboard the ISS turns into a nightmare when a single-celled organism regenerates out of control, infecting the crew with agonizing and deadly results.
So you have the isolation of space combined with the very immediate threat of body horror.
It's a terrifying and unique recommendation. #, C-Noir and action-heavy thrillers.
Okay, moving from body horror to hard-boiled noir, we have Richard Stark, the pen name of Donald E. Westlake, and his Parker series. This is mandatory reading, right?
If you want to understand modern crime fiction, you have to read Stark. The Parker series is celebrated for its style. Spare, stark, and written with his delicious economy of language. The premise is innovative because Parker is the ultimate anti-hero, a professional thief and sociopath.
Again, rooting for the bad guy.
Exactly. This is pure, amoral darkness, focused on the mechanics of the score rather than the motivations of the detective. And Westlake was an innovator. He chained the final 3 novels together in real time, meaning the closing scene of one book is the opening scene of the next.
That's fantastic for a reader who appreciates masterful structure.
It really is. And for readers who enjoy that dark noir atmosphere but want a sci-fi spin, Joe Clifford Faust is highly praised.
What's his specialty?
He's known for dark noir in a sci-fi setting, with titles like The Company Man and A Death of Honor. He merges the hard-boiled detective style with speculative elements. A reader specifically highlighted Furman's and Boddicker's Demons as a book they loved but felt no one else had ever heard of.
Which confirms Faust as a definite hidden gem for that intersection of hard-boiled crime and speculative fiction.
For sure.
Okay, let's look at the deeper cuts, the recommendations that bridge the gap between contemporary thrillers and classic mystery traditions. This section delivers highly regarded, non-mainstream suggestions outside the current bestseller lists, often featuring compelling series or literary depth.
These recommendations help you move beyond the current Anglo-American thriller market and discover gems from overseas or from literary history that hold up perfectly today, offering sophistication and satisfying structural complexity. #A, international and translated works.
Starting with international works, the community delivered a major non-English recommendation, The Devotion of Suspect X by Keigo Higashino.
Higashino is a Japanese author who's renowned for his intellectual depth. He writes what are often called puzzle box mysteries. The Devotion of Suspect X is cited for providing sophisticated twists because it often reverses the traditional mystery structure.
How so?
Instead of starting with the body and finding the killer, Higashino sometimes starts with the killer and explores how they meticulously plan the cover-up. This appeals directly to that desire for a speechless ending, built on ingenuity rather than simple shock.
Then there's Camilla Lackberg, a major Scandinavian recommendation known for her Fjällbacka series.
Lackberg is praised for writing a full series where readers fall deeper in love with the characters in each book, which is key for long-term reading satisfaction. Her complex plot lines are noted for being firmly grounded in reality, often exploring the deep, dark secrets hidden beneath the veneer of small, seemingly idyllic communities.
That focus on realistic social dynamics gives her mysteries a depth that transcends simple entertainment.
It places them firmly in the tradition of Scandinavian noir.
And there was a newer author who delivered a major surprise.
Kia Abdullah. Her book, Next of Kin, was praised for having a totally unforeseen twist. This is a great indicator that newer authors are still capable of generating that genuine shock you're looking for, proving the market isn't entirely saturated. #, people for the B, classical whodunits, and detective fiction.
Now, while you want dark and twisted, sometimes the best mystery structure comes from the classics. Wilkie Collins is an oldie recommendation that still resonates. Why should a modern thriller reader bother with a Victorian-era mystery?
Because Collins is celebrated as the foundation of the genre. He essentially invented many of the techniques we still rely on. Multiple narrators, the unreliable witness, the long-form suspense narrative.
Okay.
The Woman in White is highly regarded as one of the first and best sensationalist mysteries, and The Moonstone is described as fun and clever. These authors show how suspense was mastered long before the modern psychological thriller. Their essential context.
We also have the British Golden Age of mystery with Ngaio Marsh and Dorothy Sayers.
Ngaio Marsh wrote cozy British mysteries, often compared to Agatha Christie, but with a unique focus on theatrical settings, which adds a certain dramatic flair. Her Roderick Allen books focusing on the theater, like Light Thickens, are particularly highlighted.
And Dorothy Sayers.
With her Peter Wimsey series, she's considered intellectually sophisticated and fun. The recommendation here is specifically to start with Strong Poison, as that's the book that introduces the fan-favorite character Harriet Vane, adding this element of romance and intellectual partnership to the mystery.
Now, for the most surprising recommendation in the entire batch, A.A. Milne, the author of Winnie the Pooh.
Yes, The Red House Mystery by A.A. Milne. The shock and delight in the community finding out that the author of such gentle children's literature wrote an extremely enjoyable murder mystery is just immense.
So what's it like?
It's a clean, clever, satisfying whodunit that also includes humor, making it a perfect palate cleanser for someone who just finished the extreme trauma of, say, a Corinne Slaughter book. It's clearly a delightful, underrated gem. #C. Unique genre subversions.
We also have key titles that are genre-bending or maybe undervalued in the contemporary thriller space. First, Patricia Highsmith, The Talented Mr. Ripley.
Ripley is famous, certainly thanks to the adaptations, but a reader noted that it's often undervalued within thriller circles.
And why is that?
Because it's a novel of pure internal dread. There is no mystery to solve. The reader knows exactly what Tom Ripley is doing. The suspense comes entirely from waiting for him to be caught and anticipating his next move.
So the psychological depth is often overlooked in discussions focused only on the next big plot twist.
Exactly. This is mandatory reading for someone who loves the deep amoral darkness of Gone Girl.
And for those who specifically loved the isolated premise of Agatha Christie's, and then there were none, but want a fresh take.
The Decagon House Murders is cited as a specific recommendation because it's a great homage to the Christie classic. It offers that familiar, isolated setting and murder structure while twisting the formula in novel, clever ways. It's a nod to the Golden Age, but filtered through a modern lens.
And finally, for series readers, Val McDermid's Wire in the Blood series.
McDermid is a titan of crime fiction, often focusing on forensic science and detailed, dark investigations. The Wire in the Blood series is a reliable recommendation that consistently delivers high-quality crime fiction that delves into the darkest aspects of the human mind. The community confirms she's a safe bet for a deep series dive.
Okay, we have covered dozens of authors and titles, spanning extreme horror to literary mystery. We've delivered an immense stack of potential reading material. Let's recap the essential criteria you were searching for: darkness, unique twists, and hidden gems.
We've definitely identified some major recurring elements that define the underrated thriller, connecting back to your preferences for psychological depth and intensity. Hashtag focus on character and mental breakdown.
The truly dark and twisted recommendations consistently focus on the interior life of the characters and their mental degradation, prioritizing the why over the who.
Exactly. We see this with authors like Lucinda Berry, who excels at that, and Natsuki Rino, whose dark fiction, like Out, causes a physical shudder due to its psychological intensity. And of course, the protagonists of Perfume and the talented Mr. Ripley.
So the key takeaway is that underrated works embrace moral decay and psychological disintegration much more fiercely than mainstream thrillers.
They do. The goal of these authors is profound psychological analysis, often at the expense of the reader's comfort. Hashtag the power of the non-traditional.
We also established that the true hidden gems are often found outside of traditional linear narrative structures.
The non-traditional structure is a huge signpost for a truly unique read. This ranges from the mind-bending text of House of Leaves, where the physical act of reading is part of the anxiety, to the meta-mystery of the Armillary Papers being presented as evidence.
And it also includes unusual settings.
Right, whether that's the medical horror on the ISS in Gravity or the complex foreign landscape in Lackberg's work. When an author breaks the traditional mold, they're often delivering a truly original experience. Hashtag the problem with red herrings.
This was a fascinating discussion point. We had a reader who explicitly stated they preferred stories without large red herrings, which really contrasts with the classical mystery expectation.
This is a critical insight into modern thriller preferences. The classical function of a red herring is to serve the plot, to misdirect you. However, as we discussed with Lisa Jewell, some readers feel that large, obvious red herrings just detract from the satisfaction.
They want the conclusion to feel perfectly woven into the existing fabric of the narrative.
An inevitable tragedy built on character flaws and secrets. This highlights a definitive shift. Highly discerning readers seek earned twists based on psychological realism rather than simply surprising manipulative ones based on arbitrary plot confusion.
So after analyzing all of this, what does it mean for you, the listener? We have so many directions to go in.
Based on the density of quality recommendations and the themes we've seen, the authors that offer a high probability of immediate satisfaction are Jennifer Hillier, Lucinda Berry, and Peter Swanson. And critically, John Marrs and Corinne Slaughter. The latter two being specifically for if you truly want the darkest, most twisted material available. And you should absolutely follow up on those deeper cuts like the Armillary Papers for structure and Tana French for literary atmosphere. You know, this all raises an important question. We're seeking the underrated and the hidden gems, but in this age of viral recommendations, which is what leads to the fatigue you feel with books like Verity, does something truly remain underrated once a dedicated community champions it?
That's a great point. The moment a book is recommended enough to make it onto our deep dive list, its days as a completely unknown gem are theoretically numbered.
So the goal then becomes not finding the unknown, but finding the quality that hasn't been cheapened by overexposure.
That is the paradox of the modern reader. You have to find the darkness and depth before the marketing machine catches up and dilutes the experience. We've given you the ultimate shortcut today, moving you past the curated lists and right into the community's most trusted, dark, and twisty reads. We've defined exactly where that reliable intensity lies.
Whether that's in structural horror or emotional devastation.
So if you're looking for that book that will genuinely leave you speechless, you now have a fantastic stack of psychological intensity to choose from. Go forth and read.
Absolutely.
Now, for our final thought for you to mull over, we've seen that the authors readers are most passionate about are often the ones who are willing to write material so dark or complex that it forces readers to stop and take a break, like that reader who removed a book by Corinne Slaughter or John Mars from their home.
Right.
So, if a book disturbs you that much, does it automatically qualify as a successful, underrated work of twisted genius? Should the ultimate goal of this genre be profound discomfort, not just simple surprise?